Rabbi.
Holy Jews. Okay.
We have Kevin.
I see. Oh, we have a whole bunch of Chevron. Wow, I'm so impressed. Let me just put on my pants. I can't do this in my boxers.
Oi.
Joking. Got pants.
What a treat today. I mean, we have first Mishnah, then Mishnah Brura and Shulchan Aruch in the capital of Gemara. It's like you can't beat this.
All right. Is the rabbi and Dan on, or are we still waiting for them?
I think they're here.
I see them physically, but I want to make sure that we all have everyone on before I start.
I'm on.
Okay. Rabbi, you there? Rabbi's pulling a Zoom trick. This is a Kalman trick. Showing up for the meeting, but putting yourself on mute, taking a walk. we know the tricks.
You're looking good, Rev Kevin. You're looking refreshed. You're looking.
Hello, does anybody see me?
Not yet. Now we see you. Oh, well.
But I think coffee, if you don't mind me saying so, it's not so good to drink Yismach, to drink coffee late. You might stay up.
Oh, this is a decaf.
I'll learn.
Decaf.
Oh. All right.
After 10 o'clock, I have a decaf, so.
Okay.
Okay. Let's hop around over here. Wow, this camera is really good. It catches everything.
I'm eating.
Enjoy. Colin, what do you do? You showing off your belly? What's going on with you?
I have to get my glasses.
I could tell because Dr. Dan's not on the video that means he's probably in a white beater or something.
No, I'm not. There's something wrong with my video. I'm on video now, and it's not showing. There's something wrong with it.
Okay. So we were holding today. Today's daf is technically daf Yud Gimel. Tomorrow's daf is Yud Daled. So busy day for Kevin. But okay, yesterday, really this morning, we had gotten to the very top of Yud Gimel, to the two dots. I'm going to try to cover some ground. And to the extent that I could talk about stuff, I will, but really I want to just get caught up. So really, here we are. Okay. So if you remember back in the Mishnah had talked us about tzuras, Yevamos tzuras. Yeah, you have the tzuras, you have the erva, the tzara of the erva, and then the tzara of the tzara. We know the charts. So we had learned on Daf Gimel all the way back in the beginning of this. By the way, I just want to point out, if you haven't fallen off by now, then you're good to go. Yeah, third parak, everyone gets nervous about 5 brothers and 4 sisters and 3 sisters and 5 brothers. We'll get through it, no big deal. But if you got through all of this stuff, tzaras mamenes, tzaras islanders, tzaras saita, all the tzaras, literally, no pun intended, all these tzaras, if you're still here, I think we're good. I mean, this is, we should just continue. But either way, so we saw earlier
there's no option not to be here.
That's right. Rabbi, I used to question, we don't have a yeshiva. What are you calling people? Magidei Shiurim and Rosh Yeshiva? We don't have a yeshiva.
Yes, we do.
And now it seems like we actually have a yeshiva.
Of course we
You
do.
have Mishnayos, you have Mishnah Brura, you have all these Torah.
Of course.
Rabbi, what's going on here? It's unbelievable.
We're going to have a real yeshiva one day, with the Kyle.
Amen. Okay.
I want to see the Chevra coming to the Shulchan Aruch, to the halachas for Pesach.
Comment. I want to see you a millionaire who can support our yeshiva and the Kyle.
Amen. Okay, so we said on Daf Gimel that we were learning the halachas when we were first introduced to Masech Yevamos. We talked about Ereva and Tzara and Tzara's Tzara. And the Gemara asked, where do we know that from? And the Gemara said, we learn it from all complicated Zereshava of Aleha from Achisisha to Yevama that tells us that the Ereva is going to be Aser. Where do we know Tzara from? Litzrar. Why didn't it say Lotzer? It should have said Lotzer. It said Litzer. To tell me even Tzaras Tzaras. So now the Gemara, for some reason over here, wants to readdress the question, almost as if to say that the question earlier about Tzaras Tzara almost wasn't addressed. The Rishonim actually bring a raya from here that the girsa over there is that you really don't need a pasuk by Tzaras Tzara, which sort of addresses a little bit Rabbi Akiva Eger's kasha, which was brought up earlier in the Masechta. But either way, says the Gemara as follows: Menani merely. Where do we know Tzaras Tzara's pater? I'm reviewing there. The Makra, Litzra, the pasuk we brought earlier, Litzra, the double lashon. Atayra ribsat Tzaras harba. You see for the double resh. The double resh tells us that all tzaras, tzaras isha, tzaras ereva, a tzara of a tzara, and then however many brothers you go down the line, they're all going to be a tzaras ereva, and therefore the ptura. But it's from a pasuk. The Vashi Amar Svarahi. It's a svara, meaning to say this sounds like the back and forth in Rabbi Akiva Eiger himself. Meaning, do you need a pasuk? Do you not need a pasuk? Says Rabashi, Tzara my time asir. Why is the original tzara a problem? To be mokim erva kaima, because once the Torah tells me that a tzaras erva is effectively an eishes actually be mokim mitzvah, so then what is she? She's an erva. So now when she goes and marries Levi and Yehuda and Zvulun and Yisachar, every time you have a tzara going, what is a tzara? A tzara is just an eishes actually be mokim mitzvah. It's an erva. So what is a tzara of such a person? A tzara is a tzaras erva. Tzara nami b'makim erva kaima, and therefore all the way down the line you're always dealing with tzaras ervas. Okay, very nice. Ketzad im mesu. So it said in the Mishnah, after listing off all the 15 ladies, it said that if either they die or there's a gerushin or a mianu or islandess, that if that happens before the death of Shimon, remember the case, Reuven and Shimon are brothers. Shimon's married to two ladies. One of them is Dinah. She's fine, regular, normal, kosher girl. And then the other one is an erva to Reuven, and we said in the Mishnah that, of course, the Dinah is going to be pturim and a yibim and a chalitza. But what happens if before Shimon dies, the erva either dies, or Shimon divorces her, or she does miyun, or she's found to be an islandess? In all of those cases, we said in the Mishnah that it's like that girl's not there, and at the moment Shimon died, all he really has is one wife. If all he has is one wife, then that wife is a regular lady who's mutter and yibum. She's not pater, she's chayavis, she's mutaris and yibum. That's what it said in the Mishnah. Now, the Gemara is being medayek from the fact that the case of Gershom is the way I just set it up. That we're talking about a case where Shimon was married at the same time to two ladies, one an erva and the other one a tzaras erva. Says the Gemara, "Vafilu kanas ulovasayv gerish." It's mashma in the Mishnah that the din of the Mishnah is true, that the tzara is going to have a din of yibum even when she was married to Shimon at the same time as an erva, meaning even though bechayeha that she was a tzaras erva. Ask the Gemara Uriminu. I have a brisa, really it's a Mishnah later on Daf Lamed Amud Aleph. It says the following: Gimel achim shnayim mehen nesuim beis achyos. You have three brothers, and two of them are married to sisters. So we'll set it up nice and simple. You have Reuven married to Rachel, and you have Shimon married to Leah. Really doesn't matter who Levi's married to, but we'll say Dinah. Levi's married to Dinah. So you have Reuven married to Rachel, the Reish with the Reish. Shimon married to Leah, meaning Rachel's sister, and Levi married to Dinah. Dinah is just a regular, unrelated person over here. Now what happens? The echad nosei nachris, that's Levi married to Dinah. Girish echad mibali achyos ishtai. Shimon divorces his wife Leah, so now Shimon is no longer married to anybody. So Leah is a divorcee. She's on the Upper East Side, wherever divorcees go. Yeah. So Lamaisa, Shimon doesn't have a wife. She divorced her. And now, Umeis hanosoi nachris. Levi dies, leaving Dinah as a Shemeres Yavam. She falls to Yibam to both Reuven and Shimon. And who does it? Ukanza hamigarish, and Shimon goes ahead and basically swapped out his Leah for a new Dinah. Now, Leah and Dinah were never married to Shimon at the same time. Shimon was once married to Leah, the erva of Reuven, but when he did Yibum with Dinah, Leah was already gone. It says over there, Umeis. And now Shimon dies. And who's falling to Reuven? Dinah. Dinah, who is a tzara, technically of an erva, in the sense that throughout the life of Shimon, he was married to two ladies. One of them was an erva to Reuven, and the other one is not. So technically speaking, you can sort of call that a tzaras erva, even though the tzara and the erva were never married to Shimon at the same time. Says the Mishnah later on, Zuhi, or says the Brisa, Zuhi she'amru she'meisoi nisgarshu sarisei mutaros. It tries to say that that's the case of our Mishnah. The case of our Mishnah where it says that when there's a gerushin, that makes the tzara mutter, that's the case. Meaning, when's the case that the gerushin creates that the tzara is going to be mutter only when the tzara and the erva were never married to the same guy at the same time. But if you'd be telling me time of the girish v'achkach kanos only when the girish happens first, so they never were married at the same time. Aval kanos v'achkach girish, meaning the way we set the Mishnah up when we first learned it, that really Dinah and Leah were married to Shimon at the same time, and it's only that that Leah was divorced before Shimon died. We said over there that Dinah is not going to have a din of an erva, but rather there'll be a din yibum. Says this brisa on later on in the third parak. That brisa is mashma that it's not like that. That it comes out you have one Mishnah being chaylik with, let's say, the other Mishnah. So Gemara says loy. I'm sorry, loy, meaning to say it's mashma that in that case it wouldn't work. And loylam, that would also be called the tzaras erva. Meaning to say our Mishnah is mashma that Dinah is a bas yibum, and the Mishnah later on is mashma that Dinah, in the case of our Mishnah, is not a bas yibum. It's machlekes, it seems, machlekes tonight.
Right.
Gemara gives two answers. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, the first answer, Tavra. True, you're right. And you've found out two Mishnayos that are arguing with each other. Misha shanazu la shanazu. It's a machlekes. Meaning what? Hi, Tana, our Mishnah, who says that Dinah is a bas yibum, savar misa mapelas. Meaning, what's the point in time we care about only when Shimon dies? And if when Shimon dies, the erva is already gone. Why? Because he divorced her. Then at the end of the day, Dinah is just a regular, normal Yevama. And of course, there's going to be a din yibum. Whereas Vahaitana, the Mishnah later on, which says that Dinah is going to be P'turim min ha'yibum, Sarvani Suan Harishonim Apilim. What creates the Tsaris erva is existing in marriage together, even though, of course, it's a time of death that matters. But the fact that they were together at some point, that's already considered a problem, and it's like it stains Dinah as like a tzaras erva. So even if Leah's gone, by the time Shimon dies, doesn't matter. The tzara still has like a remnant echo of being a tzaras erva, and that Mishnah later on will hold that it's going to be p'tur min ha'yibum min chalitza. That's the first answer. That really the two Mishnayos are chaluk with each other. Rava no. What's that?
Is that allowed to be done in the rules of Mishnayos?
Yeah, of course, you can have them. I mean, listen, we saw earlier that we wanted to try to say that all the Mishnayos go in one shita, then we said it's only in one parak, and even in one parak, we try to make it go together, but lav dafka doesn't always have to be that way. Either way, Rava says a different answer to the steer in the Mishnayos. He says, Rava Amar La'olam Chatanav, meaning everyone agrees that it's the way we thought, that when Shimon dies, whoever he's married to is what matters. Who cares that he was once married to an erva? If he divorced the erva, then Dinah is for sure, no question about it, not a tzaras erva. So how do you explain the later Mishnah? That Mishnah is not excluding our Mishnah. They go in tandem, meaning to say our Mishnah is the bigger chiddush, and the later Mishnah is the smaller chiddush, and it's a vizu vein tzarich leimar zu ketani, which is sometimes what you have in Mishnayos, where the Mishnah will start talking about the primary chiddush, the bigger chiddush, the chiddush of even when they're married and co-wives in the truest form at the same time. The Mishnah later on is telling me, and certainly this case where they never even they never even share Shimon as a husband, certainly their Dinah is going to be Chayiv and Yibam. But Lo'ilam, it's all the same, which again would be the Maskana, would be like Rava, consistent with how we would have understood had we never even seen the Gemara. Either way, continues the Gemara, the last shtickle that's related to the very first Mishnah, which is Gevaldik, yeah? The Mishnah had told us that at the very last halacha in the Mishnah was that if you have Reuven married, and Reuven and Shimon are brothers, and Shimon's two wives, one of them is Dinah, and the other one is a katana who was married off by her brother or her mother, where she's only married to Shimon mid'Rabbanan. Remember, what that basically means is that Dinah has a regular normal din of Yibum min HaTorah, whereas Shimon's other wife is only a wife mid'Rabbanan. So when Shimon dies, he's now having Reuven has two ladies falling to him. One of them in HaTorah is Dinah, and the other one is mid'Rabbanan. That is Rachel. Now, what happens if Rachel had done mi'un? If she had reneged and said, I'm not interested in you, Shimon, had she done that before the marriage, before Shimon died, she would have retroactively uprooted her marriage to Shimon to begin with, and Dinah would have been the only wife falling to Reuven. But since she didn't do mi'un in the Mishnah said, therefore the halacha is chayletzes v'loy misyabemes, that the din is she does chalitza and no yibum. Now, why is that? Because even though min HaTorah, really Dinah should be able to do Yibum, the problem is that mid'Rabbanan, she's like a tzaras erva. Because since the katana that's related to Reuven is an erva min HaTorah, but only married to Shimon d'Rabbanan, so mid'Rabbanan, there's an erva here. So mid'Rabbanan, you don't do Yibum. That says the din of the Mishnah. The implication is, though, is that once Shimon dies, this Kitana, who is an erva to Ruvain, can't do miyun anymore. Says the Gemara, V'timayin hashta. Why don't we just say that Rachel, who is an 11-year-old girl falling to her father, or whatever the erva relationship is, why not say, you know what, now I want to do miyun. I'm still a Kitana. I want to uproot this entire thing lemafreya and retroactively make it that I was never married to Shimon to begin with. In which case, then the tzara should be completely mutter because she's the only one falling to Shimon. Sorry, to Reuven. But tisyabim, let the tzara do yibum. The Gemara says, let's prove that this must be like the shita, which we have not yet seen, which is inconsistent with what we've been learning all the way up until now. As I told Kalman on Shabbos when he came over and asked me about this Gemara, right, Kalman? You said, what is going on here in this note? This makes no sense. And I said, you're 100% right, because this is not like Shmuel. Shmuel was the one who said, you can do Yibum, and Yibum can even go all the way back. Says the Gemara, it must be, if you can't do Miyun with the Yavam, it must mean it's Lema Misayli Rabbi Shaya. Why? What does Rabbi Shaya say? Rabbi Shaya says, which is just a fancy way of saying Miyun can only be done with the husband. It cannot be done with the Yavam. Meaning, if the Yavam does Maimer, then Miyun could make that Maimer go away. But that's it. It cannot uproot the original marriage. It only goes back as far as the death of the original husband. Meaning, it doesn't uproot the original marriage, in which case then the fact that Shimon is dying, leaving over two ladies, Dinah, who's married to him in a Torah, and Rachel, who's only married to him in the Rabbanan, Rachel cannot now uproot, according to Rabbi Shaya, the marriage to Shimon. Once Shimon dies, that's over. There's no retroactive way of doing that. Only when he's alive can you retroactively uproot it. So the Gemara says, let's say that our Mishnah is a raya, as proof to Rabbi Shaya's halacha, that you can't do miyun once Shimon dies, once you're dealing with the Yavam. Gemara says, lo, that's not true. Meaning, we could say our Mishnah is going even like Shmuel, which would be consistent with what we've seen until now, that the miyun can even be done with the Yavam and will retroactively uproot the original marriage to Shimon. So then if that's the case, why not say that? And over here say that the tzara should be able to do yibum. Why say, says the Gemara, like tzaras erva shani. When you're dealing with a tzaras erva, the problem over here is that the Tani Rabbi Bar Yecheskel, before I read it, I just want to say it outside so we're clear on what's shot in the Gemara here, that when you're dealing with a normal case of miyun, when you're talking about, let's say, a regular guy who's married to a Ketana, and now he dies, and what do you call it? She's not an erva. Okay, so Shmuel will say you could do yibum with the miyun with the yavam, and that works retroactively. Because what's the big deal? No big deal. But here, what's happening? Reuven's daughter, let's say, is falling to him in yibum. This is a tzaras erva. That Dina's a tzaras erva. Now you're right. Technically, she's not, because if you do miyun, it uproots the mafreya. But this looks to the outside world like his Dina is a tzaras erva falling to him, and we're going to let him do yibum with her? That's not possible. People are going to think you can have yibum with the tzaras erva. So therefore, we're not going to do it. How do we see that? Says the Gemara, like Rabbi Bar Yecheskel said in a different case. Miyana bebal muteres love. If you have a woman who's married to, I don't know, whatever, his name is Reuven. Let's say you have a random case. You have Rachel married to Reuven as a Ketana. Now, she can do miyan with Reuven, and if she did, the marriage is gone. And if she did, then she'd be allowed to marry Reuven's father. Meaning normally Reuven's father would be her father-in-law. Meaning for Reuven's father, it would be his daughter-in-law, which is an erva. But since miyan works in Lamafreya, it's as if she was never married to Reuven. So it's like retroactively, since she was never married to Reuven, then Reuven's father is unrelated to her, and she'd be allowed to be with him, says Rabbi Bar Yecheskel. However, miyan abiyam, if Reuven dies, and now she wants to do miyan with Shimon in order to be with Reuven and Shimon's dad, that's a problem. Miyan abiyavam asur la'aviv. Why? Lamafreya, the marriage should be uprooted and should be allowed to be with the father for the same reason. The reason it's also is because Alma Mishas Nefila near is Kikaloso, because now why are you doing miyan with Shimon? Who is Shimon to you? Must be the reason why you're doing it is because of Yibum, meaning to say there's a problem already that you're doing this act only because of Yibum, meaning to say that you can't really, even though in halacha you can lemafreya retroactively uproot it, practically people are going to see that. What are you doing? And this is, why are you even dealing with Shimon? It must be because there's a Yibum situation. It must be the marriage was real. Must be that their father is your father-in-law, in which case then it's an erva. So to hachanami in our case, Mishas Nefila nearest Ketzaras Bitay. Since by dealing with the case of Tzaras Bitay, really technically if you do miyun with the yavam, it uproots it lemafreya, and the tzara is really just a regular normal girl, but it looks like Tzaras Bitay. Therefore, since Tzaras Bitay is a kares, major problems, Midrabanan, we're going to say it's also. Normally, I wouldn't say in the middle of a Masechta, in the middle of a Perek, Hadron, but Hadron, the first Mishnah. This is the end of the first Mishnah's Gemaras, really some of the toughest dapim in Shas. And we did it together. And I'm very, very proud, really, honestly. And I don't think listen, it's very easy for someone to say, and I hear this a lot, and I'm just going to say it publicly, I don't like when a lot of people crap on Daf Yomi, because as far as I'm concerned, besides the consistency of the day in, the day out, and just the trenches of just not very easy to fall off this, first of all, very easy to mail it in because you're like, I don't get it. But the fact that we did it, and I know some days were hard and some days were not, the fact that we got to this point, listen, we're going to have a lot of tough Gemaras coming up. Believe me, we're very early in the Masechta. I just want to take a moment, acknowledge, getting to this point. If you would have said to me on Daf Beis, are you nervous? I wouldn't have said it then. But now I'm going to say it. I was nervous. No. And we did it. And I'm very proud of you guys. I mean, I say it with respect. I'm just saying, very proud. Okay. Says the Mishnah. This Mishnah actually should be familiar. We've already seen it twice in the first 13 blot. This Mishnah is the continuation of the first Mishnah. What did the first Mishnah effectively say? There's 15 ladies that if your brother Shimon is married to one of them, when Shimon dies, you're patur from Yibum with her because there's a pre-existent erva. But in all the cases in the Mishnah, we said that they can possibly marry Shimon. Why? Because the only reason why they're an erva to you is either through some type of marriage or through the mother relationship. But since Reuven and Shimon are brothers from their father, any erva that exists for Reuven that is caused by a relationship with his father will automatically exist for Shimon also. There are 6 examples, and we're about to read in the Mishnah, that follow that rule, where the Chiddush is going to be in this Mishnah that we don't say that if one of those ladies should be married to some random dude, that if that dude dies, we don't say that the other lady now is usher to you also, which we discussed earlier. What's the big Chiddush? I mean, it sounds pretty obvious. But that's good for the Chiddush in the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Sheish arayos chamurus me'elu. Chamurus here is not a really very accurate term. Chamurus is not the right word here, but the effective idea is there are 6 other arayos that, at least in the sense, they're stricter in the sense they're limited to who they can marry from the 15 that we listed in the first Mishnah. And what is their stringency? That since they can only marry other people, not Shimon, Tzarisei Mutaros, they're therefore going to make their co-wives always mutter to you. Meaning we don't say that if your mother happens to be married to a guy, that if that guy has a second wife and that guy's unrelated, we don't say that that other wife is going to ever be usher to you. That's really the Chiddush of the Mishnah. Who are these 6? And we'll see that each and every one of these are a byproduct of your own relationship with your father that Shimon must also have. Imo, your mother is either Shimon's mother, because you guys are both brothers from father and mother, or if you're only brothers from the father, then Imo, like we explained, would be covered under the next one, Ve'eshes Aviv, your father's wife. Now, remember, we learned in Gemara earlier that Imo might contain also Anusas Aviv, Mafutas Aviv. That's a Gemara earlier. We'll leave that for now. The third example is Va'achos Aviv, your father's sister. This is your aunt. Your father's sister is an erva. If it's also to you, it's also to Shimon, because you guys are both brothers from your father. Achosame Aviv, again, your sister. Let's say Reuven and Shimon are brothers from their father. If they also have a sister from their father, they're both equally usher to her, so she can therefore not marry Shimon just as easily as she cannot marry Reuven. The Eshes Achi Aviv, the wife of your father's brother. This is your uncle's wife. So your father's brother's wife. Again, Shimon and Reuven have the same father, so their father's brother's wife is the same to the both of them. The Eshes Achiv Me'aviv, and the last one is, what are we talking about here? Eshes Ach. Eshes Ach meaning if he has children. Eshes Ach, if he has children, is going to be usher, right? Meaning that's just another.
So the guy was over Nevera, basically.
Yes, exactly.
Didn't we say in the Gemara we don't have those cases?
Exactly. These 6 cases cannot possibly marry Shimon. So let's say you have a case where, let's say Levi's wife, right, is to be married to some random guy. We don't say that Levi's wife, no Isser, take it back. No Isser. Levi's wife, your brother, who Levi's got a bunch of kids, so she's an Eshes Ach for the rest of her life to you guys. If she's married to some random David guy, and David has another wife named Dina, and he divorces her. Now Dina wants to know can I marry Reuven or Shimon? The answer is yeah, of course. Why? Because this is Otzaras Erva, but not of Otzaras Erva b'Makom Mitzvah, because it's never possible for Levi's wife to ever marry one of Reuven's brothers, because it would always be an Isser Eshes Ach. So these are the 6 cases. Says the Mishnah. We're now going to be introduced to a new opinion, which is going to sound almost like an entirely new Masechta Yevamos. We brought it up once earlier in passing. We're now going to deal with it in a little detail. Says the Gemara. Beishamai matirim hatzaros la'achim. Until now, we've been discussing erva is patur miyibam, and everyone agrees to that. But not everybody agrees to the tzaras. Do we say a tzaras erva? Classic case. Reuven and Shimon are brothers. Shimon's got 2 wives. Dinah, who are classic non-relative of Reuven, and then you have Rachel, the relative of Reuven. This woman Rachel, let's say it's Bita, let's say it's Ima, whatever, not Ima, sorry, Achos of Ima, whatever the case of the erva is, we say that Dinah, because she's co-wived to Shimon with an erva to Reuven, she herself becomes an erva. That's what we just said that at the beginning of the daf. Says Beis Shammai, I don't know what you're talking about, no such thing. The erva, she's going to be patur min yibam. The other woman, completely chayiv in yibam, a regular, normal din of yibam. In fact, so much so that if you don't do yibam or chalitza, she still has a zika to Shimon. It's a regular, normal case of a woman who's still stuck to Shimon. She can't marry anyone else. She's not allowed to. She has to get a chalitza or she has to get a yibam according to Shimon. Sorry, according to Beis Shammai. Meaning, we don't say the fact that she happens to share Shimon with an erva of Reuven, that doesn't matter. To Reuven, if Reuven's the only brother that survives, he has to do chalitza, and listen to this, says Beis Shammai, or yibum. He could do either one. It doesn't matter that she's married to a guy who's married to another erva. It's important that we understand, before we even try to think about what Beis Shammai thinks, what his opinion is. Just we have to make sure we understand. He is diametrically opposed to Beis Hillel's opinion, which has been the Gemara up until now. He holds that a tzara of an erva, meaning tzaras erva, it's fine. We only say the erva doesn't have a din yibum. Okay. Beis Hillel Eiser, Beis Hillel Asers, meaning this is consistent with what we know. Beis Hillel says even a tzaras erva is pater. We know Beis Hillel's reason. Litzrar and Yevamos, Vayikcha, whatever, however you darshan, or whether it's like Rebbe or it's like the Chacham and whatever it is, we have drushes that say that the tzaras erva is also. Beis Shammai doesn't hold from that. We're going to see why in a moment. First, let's finish the Mishnah. Mishnah continues, and it speaks out what really, to be honest with you, the Gemara is going to ask is obvious. Once you say what we just said, the following is just the logical byproduct. What if you now have a case of a tzaras erva? Reuven and Shimon. Shimon has 2 wives. One is Dinah, non-erva, and the other one is an erva Rachel. Let's say, we're talking about Dinah now, Shimon dies. If Reuven does chalitza with Dinah, so according to Beis Shammai, she needs a chalitza. So Beis Shammai poislin min kahuna. She's called a chalutza. Why? Because the spitting in the shoe was an actual important and significant act. Why? Because she has a zika. According to Beis Shammai, she's a shemeres yavam, she's a Yevamos. She needs either yibum or chalitza. So if you did chalitza, it takes effect, and therefore, according to Beis Shammai, this woman can't marry a kohen now because she's a chalutza. Ubeis Hillel machshirin. She, of course, she can marry a kohen. According to Beis Shammai, you did chalitza. According to Beis Hillel, all you did was you spat in a shoe. You did nothing. It was like air. There's no zika. According to him, the tzaras erva is completely patur min yibum min chalitza. She took his shoe off and spit on the ground, and the whole thing was just a ceremonial waste of time, according to Beis Hillel. So that's obvious. Now let's just point this out now. According to Beis Hillel, this woman is completely mutter to marry whoever she wants, even if she doesn't do chalitza, even if she doesn't do yibum. She's patura. Which means that according to Beis Shammai, a tzaras erva that comes from, let's say, Beis Hillel's neighborhood needs chalitza. So let's say a girl from Beis Hillel's community pops into Beis Shammai's community who happens to have been married to Shimon, who is a tzaras erva. Beis Shammai is going to have to be nervous. Who can marry this lady? She's usher maybe to marry until Reuven gives her chalitza or yibum or something. All right, so let's just I just want to make sure we understand where there could come up an issue. Now we're about to see even a bigger issue. What happens if this yabmu? What if now Reuven actually does yibum with Dinah? So let's work it through. Beis Shammai will say they're married. They're married. It's a good yibum. In fact, there's nothing wrong with it. Adarabah. They're married. What's that?
You're supposed to.
You have to. You have a chiyuv to do something, either chalitza or yibum. So machshirin, meaning to say, She's not a chalutza. She's not a zona. She's nothing. She did exactly what she's supposed to do. Beis Hillel, whoa, major problems over here. What is this woman? She's an Eshesach to Ruvain, who doesn't have a mitzvah because she's pater. So she's an erva. Kares. The act of Yibum was an act of Bia, which is chayiv kares. If a child comes from that baby, from that act, the kid's a mamzer, according to Beis Hillel. This woman, Gemara doesn't speak it out, but Rashi speaks it out. She's a Zaina because she did this act, according to Beis Hillel, and therefore she'd be usher to marry a Kayan. Kayan's not allowed to marry a Zaina. The massive nafkaminas in Yuchsin here, in Yichus. How can Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai even live in the same city? It's like Lahavdil, like in Eretz Yisrael, if they all of a sudden they start accepting conversions from Reform rabbis. Now all of a sudden you can't know who's Jewish anymore because you're relying on fathers being Jewish, and completely makes the thing, you can't rely on it anymore. You have to like really keep good books on people. The Gemara is going to address this issue. But either way, says the Mishnah, even though each one has an opinion about the other one being asur and mutter, still, or this one says Pasuk says kosher, they still married each other's ladies, which on the surface sounds crazy. Because according to Beis Shammai, he means that he's allowing shemeris, women or asur belav. And chas v'shalom, according to Beis Hillel, it comes out that some of these ladies are chayiv kares, and you might even have mamzeris over here. So we'll see in the Gemara exactly how it's possible. I'll give you a heads up. The answer is they're all going to always tell each other who's who, meaning it's not just that they went ahead and stamazai just started marrying. They relied on the fact that they loved each other so much that they would never, even though it argued in halacha, they would never, chas v'shalom, do it in a way that would create any problems. So if there was a lady who once was married and was a tzara, Beis Hillel would let Beis Shammai know, hey, just know, no chalitza was done with this lady, so you may want to get Reuven to give her a chalitza. And Beis Shammai would tell the people of Beis Hillel, you should know that this woman, she went ahead and did yibum, meaning to you, she's a zayna, don't let her marry a kayan, and her children are mamzerim, so don't marry them. We hold not like that. That's the way the Gemara is going to touch on the Mishnah. Not only that, says the Mishnah, last case, kol ha-taharos v'ha-tameos, it's really just similar halacha, just not talking about yibum, not talking about tum and tahara. And in tum and tahara, different kalim, they had different rules. Sometimes Beis Shammai was machmir, sometimes Beis Hillel was machmir. Generally, Beis Shammai was machmir. Kol ha-taharos v'ha-tameos shahayu elu mitaharim ve'elu mitamim, meaning elu mitaharim is probably Beis Hillel. The elu mitamim is probably Beis Shammai, and yet still, nimnum oisin taharas elu al gabe elu. Rashi speaks out. They had no problem borrowing from each other, even though some of the kalim were tummy according to some and Torah according to the others. Gemara is going to explain the same thing. They would let them know, this is a thing that I used for a tumah that you would hold the star. This is a thing that same idea. Okay, just quick review. What does the Mishnah say? Beis Shammai holds that a tzara serva, regular normal yevama. She falls to yibam, no problem. And then the Mishnah continued and started talking about, we'll deal with the second half really a little bit at the bottom of the Gemara and then really more tomorrow morning. Amrib Shimon ben Pazi, my time to Beis Shammai. Where is Beis Shammai coming from out of left field that a tzara serva is going to be chayiv and yibam? The pasuk says, literally it means the woman of the dead guy, right? Shimon's wife shall not be hachutza out leishzar to another man. That word hachutza is completely extra. Read the words without it. The dead guy's wife shall not be with another man. Meaning what? She's a Yevama. She's got to do Yibum with Ruvain. Hachutza is completely extra. What can hachutza be understood to mean? It could mean like chutza, like chitzona. She's like the outer lady. Meaning what? As michlal deika pnimis, there's an inner lady. Who's the inner lady? The erva, the karov, the relative. So who's the chitzona? She's the tzaras erva. Meaning Beis Shammai says the pasuk itself is talking about a case where Shimon is dying with two wives. One of them is a tzara, the other one's an erva. If the tzara is a tzaras erva, and the Torah is saying that even that the tzara still is not allowed to be with anyone else, that what? That she has a halacha of not marrying someone else because she's still a Yevama. So it says Beis Shammai, you see from the pasuk that a tzaras erva is still chayiv in yibum. That's how he comes. Meaning he clearly doesn't darshan litzra the way Beis Hillel does. Now it's going to be difficult for Beis Hillel because this is a problem. Beis Hillel has to deal with hachutza. What's he going to do with it? So Gemara is going to address it. Well, Beis Hillel, you have this hachutza problem. L'chora Beis Shammai is correct. That's the correct way to read the pasuk. Says the Gemara, no. Ubeis Hillel mi boiluhu lekeder Rav Yehuda Merav. Rav Yehuda Merav, he said the following halacha, something that we all know, but we'll just read through. Minayin jein kedushin toivsim b'yavama. How do we know that even though a Yevama, after Shimon dies, is only usher to marry other people as a lav, a regular lav, there's no kares. If she sleeps with another man at this point, she's not chayiv kares. It's a special lav that she's not allowed to be with anyone else. And yet, if random David went over to a Yevama and said, "Hi Yevama, I want to marry you. Here's Kesef Kiddushin," doesn't take. Meaning, even though Rabbi Akiva generally is the one who holds that it doesn't take like that, will agree by this specific lav that Kiddushin doesn't take. Now, how do I know that? That's the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda Merav. Says the Gemara, "Shenemar lo siya eishes hameis hachutza liishzar," meaning to say lo siya b'havaya lizar. So the word hachutza there, he understands as that special drasha. Therefore, it's not available for what Beis Shammai said. That's the back and forth Beis Shammai. So ask the Gemara, Beis Shammai, you obviously agree to this halacha, don't you? Miksiv. So he says no. It doesn't say lachutz, which would make a lot of sense to say that then it means it's referring to a case of Kiddushin not working. Because again, let's read the pasuk. Lo sihia eishes hameis. Let's read it now with Beis Shammai's suggested word. Lo sihia eishes hameis lachutz leishzar. She shouldn't be to the outside leishzar. No, it says chutza. She shouldn't be out external, meaning to say that it's talking about the tzara, meaning to say, and therefore it's saying that there's a tzara and there's an erva, and the tzara is going to be chayiv and yibum. Beis Hillel says no. Beis Hillel kiven the kasve chutza is command the kas of the chutztam. Chutza and lachutz are the same thing. The hay on the end is the same thing as the lamed at the beginning, which we know in general Hebrew it's true. The Tanya, we bring a brisa to that effect. Rabbi Nechemia Omer, kol tevish etzricha lamed betchilasa. Any word that has a lamed at the beginning, like le something, is the same thing. Hit la hakas of hay b'sayf. The Torah will sometimes put a hay on the end. Like instead of saying la negev, we'll say negba, right? Like you put a hay on the end to say la negev becomes negba. The Gemara gives some examples. A ton of the Be'er Bishmael, kigoin olim alima, machanayim machanayma, mitzrayim mitzrayma, tipetlayma, Yerushalayma, midbara. These are all cases where the lamed at the beginning would have made the same exact sense as the hay on the end. So says the Gemara that Beis Hillel says, don't tell me chutza doesn't mean lachutz. It's the same thing. And therefore, if it's lachutz, it's coming to teach me that Kedushin's not typhus. In which case, then it's not available to tell me your din Beis Shammai that Kedush, that the tzara is going to be chayiv and yibum, but rather I'm going to say that it's used for something else, and I'll darshan litzvah to tell me that there's pater. Ayu Beis Shammai, their Yehuda Merav minolahu. Okay, so they each have their explanations. So that means that the pasuk is occupied. How does he know the halacha that Kedushin is not typhus by a Yevama? Where it says Malay Nafka, the simple read in the pasuk is that she shouldn't be to another man. Another man implies that no other man can marry her. Says the Gemara, Beis Hillel, Nami Tepiklahu Milay Zar. That's a very good point. Says the Gemara, you're right. Enechanami, he does. If he does, so we bring the whole question back again. So then chutz is available. If chutz is not being learned to teach me that there's no kedushin by Yevama, it's back to potentially being learned exactly like Beis Shammai did, that it means that a tzara is going to be chayiv and yibum. Says the Gemara, chutz alamali. He says, no, l'rabas ha'arusa. Chutz is coming to teach me that the din yibum applies even if Shimon only married it as a kedushin and didn't do nisuin. Meaning, let's say you have Reuven and Shimon are brothers. We know this, we've been assuming it, but we got to know where from. What if Shimon only made kedushin and he never did chuppah? He died in between or whatever it is. Do we now say that woman is a Yevama or not? Says Beis Hillel, she's a Yevama. How do I know that? The pasuk says chutza. Chutza implies that chutza means she's not in the pneumius with him. They never consummated the marriage. She was only kedushin, and yet that's still called a Yevama. Ve'idich, Beis Shammai, where are you going to learn that halacha from? He says, no, he also learns that from the same pasuk. He says, michutza hachutza. He says the extra hay tells me, right? The second hay on the back, you want to tell me that means like Beis Hillel said, it's lachutz. But having a hay on the front and a hay on the back, that's a little extra. That extra hay, he says, that's going to teach me this din that even in Arusa is called a Yevama. Ve'idich Beis Hillel, he says that, hey, chutza hachutza loishma mashmelu, that's already too subtle of a diak. He doesn't hold that there's anything to be learned from there. And therefore, everyone shalom al Yisrael, the maskana, Beis Shammai learns out that a tzara is going to be chayiv and yibum. Beis Hillel learns not. Beis Hillel says it's come from litzvah. Beis Shammai says, no, I have a pasuk of hachutza. Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai learn from hachutza additional things. One learns that kedushin is not toivus by Yevama. The other thing they both learn is that you can have yibum from an arusa. And Beis Shammai has the extra hay. That extra hay allows him to get that extra drasha to teach me that a tzara is going to be chayiv and yibum. So all from this one tiny little hay, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel have a massive machlekes do we say that it's Tzaras Chayiv and Yibam or not? Which, by the way, leads to the two of them having to deal with Shidduchim, and how do I let one marry from the other? Because maybe I have Mamzeiras, maybe I have Karas, v'chulu v'chulu. Says the Gemara. That's the answer according to Rav Shimon Pazi said. He all comes to these various different drushes. Rava says, no. It has nothing to do with the psukim. Really, maybe he doesn't dash in the hay, however you want to say, he doesn't like the drushes. He says it's a svara. Taimayu de Beis Shammai, the reason why Beis Shammai says that you can't say it's Tzara is going to be Pater Mina Yibam, but rather she's Chayiv and Yibam is because the Ein Isser Chalal Isser, this is a huge Shas topic, but we'll give it the Daf Yomi version. Ein Isser Chalal Isser means you can't have a prohibition take effect in an item or a person when there's already an Isser there. So the classic example might be, you can't say that if I shecht an animal, kosher, so now the animal's kosher, if the animal was a treifa and I messed up the shchita, you can't tell me that I'm over on two aveiros, eating nevela and I'm eating treifas. It's either tarfus or it's nevela. It can't be both. You can't have isser, chal, al isser. So over here, what are we saying? We're saying you have a woman, she's an eshes ach, and potentially an achos isha, let's say. So in those two cases, you have two ervas. You can't have two ervas fall on one woman. Says Rava, that means, for instance, if you'd have such a woman who is an eshes ach, let's say Reuven and Shimon are brothers, and Shimon goes and marries a lady. We'll call her Rachel. And then, meaning now Rachel is also to Reuven, why? Because it's his brother's wife. And now Reuven goes and marries Leah, his sister, adding upon Rachel a problem now of her being his wife's sister. That second Isser, says Rava, can't tap. It can't attach to Rachel because she's already filled. Meaning that you can't have two Issers on one person. The Gemara is assuming, in this Havamina right here, it's important to speak it out, that when Rava says this answer, the Gemara is assuming, the way at least Rashi and most Rishonim learn, that Rava is only really explaining that Beis Shammai only argues with Beis Hillel in those cases that are created through marriage. Meaning if it's an inherent erva, like Bitoi, which is from him, or another example of an inherent one would be Achoso Me'ima, your sister from your mother. This didn't happen via someone marrying somebody. The moment the two of you were born in the world, the two of you exist as an erva relationship. That could never come later. It's either there when you were born or it's not. The only other ones in the Mishnah, the other like 12 or 13, all happen through some form of marriage. Meaning either your wife's daughter, okay, you married your wife, so your wife's daughter wasn't an erva until you married her. Or Achos Isha, only once you got married did her sister become problematic on you. So the Gemara and the Havamina thinks Rav is really only coming to explain, and his opinion is that when Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are arguing, they're only arguing in the list of the Mishnah, the part of the Mishnah where a marriage plays a role. But on the cases where it's an inherent erva not, this is the Havamina of the Gemara. And therefore what it's saying is that since the marriage can happen later in life, now you can start asking, well, which happened first? Did the Isser Eshes Ach happen first, or did the Isser Erva happen first? Because since it can happen in a back, one can come first or the other one can come first, you could start talking about Ein Isser Chalal Isser, because one is falling on top of the other. Because it'll come out, just to speak it out slowly, if it's an inherent Erva, then how could the Isser Eshes Ach ever fall on a Bitoi? If we're saying Ein Isser Chalal Isser, then a daughter is an Erva. If she's an erva, then the Isser Eshes Ach never falls on her. So therefore, he says, even Beis Shammai would agree for sure over there that that's a tzaras erva, and for sure she's going to be usher. It's only when what we're saying is that the erva of Eshes Ach precedes the other erva, let's say Achos Isha, then we'll say Ein Isser of, let's say, Achos Isha, Chal al, someone who's already an Eshes Ach. That's Rava's svara. And really, what's the argument? It's very simple. In order for a tzaras erva to be a tzaras erva, the other woman has to be an actual erva. Remember, Eshes Ach is mutter when there's yibum. So that erva goes away, Eshes Ach. And if there's no other erva left, then we're fine. If there's another erva left, you have a problem. But the only way the other erva can be there is if it's chal. And if she's already an Eshes Ach beforehand, the Isser can't be chal. So that's how Rava wants to explain, at least initially, why Beis Shammai says that tzara is going to be mutter, because she's not really a tzara of an erva, she's a tzara of a woman who is just an Eshes Ach, which when the brother dies, will fall to yibum. That's how they want to explain in the Havamina. So Rava Amar Taimayu de Beis Shammai de Isser Chalas, which explains now what the Gemara's first question is. That works. Teinach heicha de nasa meis. When Shimon got married to his wife first, the achar kach nasa chay, and only then afterwards did Ruvain marry Shimon's wife Rachel's sister Leah. Meaning, Rachel was ushered to him first as an Eshes Ach. That explains why now when Ruvain marries Leah, marrying Leah can't add new Isser onto Rachel, who's already Usher Eshes Ach. That'll explain Beis Shammai's opinion. However, why? Because Le'asi Isser Achos Isha v'chayala Isser Eshes Ach. The marriage-induced erva cannot be added on top of an already existent erva. That'll explain Beis Shammai's opinion in that direction. However, Ella Nosa Chay, if Ruvain first marries Leah, and only afterwards did Shimon marry Rachel. So now, who is Rachel to Ruvain? It's first his wife's sister, and only afterwards his brother's wife. The Isser Eshes Ach is happening second. In that case, the erva is there. Achos Isha Kadim. So it is an erva. And so now that Shimon's married to Dinah and this lady, she's a tzaras erva, and yet Beis Shammai doesn't make an indication in the Mishnah that he only applies it in one case or not the other. It seems like across the board, tzaras erva is going to be okay, but it should only work in one direction, not the other. So the Gemara says, and why? Kivin de le'asi iser eshes ach v'chayil iser achos isha yahavilok tzaras erva shaloi b'moka mitzvah v'sharya. That's the answer. I jumped the gun a little bit. Says the Gemara. Says the Gemara. V'achkach nosa meis achos isha kadem. That's the question. The question is, the erva is there, and Beis Shammai is not mechalek. The answer of the Gemara is, and this is a very interesting lumdus. Kivin deloy asi. Again, what's the case here? We're talking about where the first iser is the iser eshes ach, right? And we said when the iser erva comes afterwards, it's not chal. That works. What about if it's the other way around, where the erva starts? So first he marries, Reuven marries Leah, and Rachel becomes also as his wife's sister, and only then does Shimon marry Rachel. In that case, the iser eshes ach comes second. In that case, the tzara should be potter. She's a tzaras erva. He says no. It goes in the opposite direction completely. He says kivon deloy asi iser eshes ach v'chayla iser achos isha. Since the iser eshes ach isn't even there, why? Because you already have an iser chalal iser. She's already an iser erva of eshes of achos isha. It's like there's no mitzvah zibum. Havya la tzaras erva shaloi b'makom mitzvah. Why? Because you only have a mitzvah yibum when you're an Eshes Ach, right? Only when you're married to the brother. So even though technically she's married to Shimon, I'm talking about Rachel now, but who is Rachel? Rachel is at first an erva, which means that there's no mitzvah said to her, which means when Shimon's dying, there's no mitzvah yibum that she has. So therefore, it's like an islandess. It's very similar to an islandess. What did we say? The way we hold an islandess is that when Shimon's dying is when the Isser gets created. Well, if that's the case, the Tzara is going to be completely mutter. Same thing over here, Visharya. It's very similar to an islandess in the sense that there's no Zika, right? When you're an Erva, there's no Zika. If there's no Zika, that means you're not even part of the Parsha of Yibam to begin with. So who is Dinah? Dinah's just a regular Tzara, not even a Tzara. She's really she's a Tzara, Shaloi b'Makom mitzvah, meaning there's no mitzvah Yibam. The only time a tzaras erva is going to be a problem is if there's zika for both ladies, and one of them's an erva. But if there's no zika to begin with, because the erva predates the eshes ach, then enechenami it's not going to work. So it comes out that in Beis Shammai, no matter which way you go, whether the eshes ach. Now, interestingly, once you say this, now this will even apply to bitay, because again, what are we saying? We're saying when the erva predates the iser eshes ach, that original erva prevents the eshes ach from ever taking place, which means there's no zika, which means the tzara, even of tzara's bitay, is considered a tzara of an erva shaloi b'makom mitzvah, and therefore she's going to be mutter. Beis Shammai is in yeshiva, again, it's been many years since I remember it, trying to understand Beis Shammai is one of the hardest parts of Yevamos, right up there with just trying to keep a cheshbon in all the cases. Beis Shammai, it's a completely different Masechta Yevamos. The best way I can think of it is, and this doesn't help because islandess is also hard, but Beis Shammai's version of tzaras erva is very similar to the way we hold tzaras islandesses. Because while they're married, it's like she's already completely not connected to the parsha of Yibam at all. So when Shimon dies, who is this woman? The Torah doesn't talk about her in Yibam. It's like when it comes to Yibam, she doesn't exist. So what's Dinah? Dinah's on her own. Dinah has got a din Yibam. So therefore there's a din Yibam by Dinah. if that makes sense. It's the closest I can say Daf Yomi to Daf Yomi to try to explain it. But either way, what did it say in the Mishnah? It said in the Mishnah that, again, Beis Shammai holds that a tzara has a din yibum, which means the zika, which means she needs chalitza if Shimon dies, right? Beis Hillel says she's completely mutter to go marry whoever she wants. The only person she's not allowed to be with actually is Reuven, right? Beis Shammai says she needs zika. She has zika. She needs chalitza or yibum for Reuven. Says the Gemara, Chaltzu Beis Shammai place in front of the Gemara Pshita. This is obvious. Once you tell me what they hold, why does the Mishnah have to go through each one of the cases? Isn't it obvious that if you hold, you have a din zika, you need a chalitza? If you don't hold, you need that it's zika, you don't need chalitza. Why do you got to go spell it out? Gemara says no. It's la'afuki de Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, which is a Gemara on Yudal Amud Beis, in the end of Yudal Amud Beis. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri actually has a suggestion to solve the whole problem over here. What's the issue? Beis Shammai's got a problem because all the ladies from Beis Hillel might very well be what do you call it? Usher to marry because they're shemeres Yevamos without zika. They're zika without a chalitza. And Beis Hillel has a problem because you might be dealing with ervas and mamzerim. So we got to figure out what's what. Says Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, why not just say everyone's got to do chalitza? Meaning Beis Shammai should say you do chalitza, Beis Hillel should say do chalitza, and it solves the whole problem. Why? Because it'll solve the Beis Shammai problem by doing chalitza. Now you don't have to be concerned about that the woman is a shemeres yavam that isn't fixed. And Beis Hillel also, by doing chalitza, what do you accomplish? Now none of Beis Shammai's ladies are going to be running around doing yibum with men they shouldn't be doing yibum with. You're not going to have any chorus. You're not going to have any mamzer. It solves all the problems. That was in a suggestion on Amud Beis, which the Gemara is not going to conclude clearly one way or the other. So the Gemara is explaining, why did our Mishnah need to even mention the dinim of chalitza? Because if had you not mentioned it, you might think we hold like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, who says everyone does chalitza. Which would fix all the problems. Mashmalan, the Beis Hillel machshir, we need to teach you that no. Beis Hillel says machshir, meaning Beis Hillel does not require chalitza, and therefore, since he doesn't require chalitza, we don't say that if you do chalitza, that she's a chalutza. Meaning, had it been that we held like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, then even Beis Hillel would agree that she becomes a chalutza, because once we require the chalitza just to fix the problems, the fact that you did it, it's a real thing. Now she's a chalutza. Kamashmal in the Mishnah that according to Beis Hillel, this girl can go marry a kohen now. The chalitza is just like throwing water against the window. It does nothing. Continues the Gemara, Nisyamu Beis Hillel Paislin, which again, the Gemara is bothered, Hasu Lamali. It's just, again, the logical conclusion of whatever the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says what they hold. Well, we now know. Obviously, Beis Hillel will say that doing yibum, you're over, she's a zoyna, and you create mamzerim. And Beis Shammai is going to say you're doing a mitzvah. So Gemara says, you're right. I did the Tana Chaltzu, Tana Nami Minis Yabmu. The Mishnah is just coming off of the first din. Put two dots here. The Gemara doesn't do it, but really right now, there's two dots. Says the Mishnah. Snan Hasam, a Mishnah. Mishnah we learned a couple of Masechtas ago. Megillah Nikres Be'echadasar, Shnemasar, Shloishasar, Arbasar, Chamishasar, Leipach Flayaser. Learned the first Mishnah Megillah. You lay in the Megillah on 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 of other, not the 10th and not the 16th, without getting through the whole cheshbon. It was in order, if you remember, to make that the villages should be able to read the Megillah and not have to come back to the big city twice. So we pushed it to the Monday and Thursday, whichever was the most convenient, to allow them to be in the big city while they're doing business, to dealing with the sudas and stuff. They don't have to come twice. Whatever the Gemara over there is, we remember the Mishnah in detail. But the point is you have 5 separate days. The rabbi spoke about this a little bit over Purim. How is it possible that Hashem gives us mitzvahs? We have 5 separate days. Everyone's being mekayim the mitzvah on a different day. So our Gemara is going to deal with what's the halachic problem with that. I'll give you a little bit of a foreshadowing. It's a problem of loisis goydudu. What's loisis goydudu? The classic example of loisis goydudu that comes up often is tefillin on chalamayit. That's the classic example. Some people wear tefillin on chalamayit and some people don't. What's the problem of loisis goydudu? The problem of loisis goydudu is different Rishonim say different ways, but the way Rashi says it here is the way most Rishonim say it. We don't want it to appear like we have 2 separate Torahs. Now again, it's important just for context. Loisis goydudu does not mean we sing Sephardi, they sing Ashkenazi. Right? It's very clear that it doesn't mean the outside of the Sephardi Torah looks this, the outside of our Torah looks like that. The inside of the Torah is the same. Loisis goydudu, Nira Kishnei Torahs isn't really designed for complete Amaratzim who have absolutely no clue what's going on. The fact that you'd be lost in a Sephardi minyan does not mean that that's like loisis goydudu. Loisis goydudu, as we'll see, is how do we treat halacha when halacha is being acted upon in 2 diametrically opposed ways in a public format where now it looks like the halacha is not clear. There's nothing wrong with being machmer misafek. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a hanhaga in a community that inherently is contradictory. It looks like there's two different Torahs. That's what Lois is going to do. It's a tremendous sugya, just like Einis Chalalis is a tremendous sugya, but like again, we're going to touch on it a little bit superficially, but we'll do our best to try to touch what it is. Says the Gemara. We're going to work with the assumption that Reish Lakish holds of Lois is going to do, and Rabbi Yochanan does not. This is not agreed upon by all Rishonim, but that's the way we're going to explain the Gemara. Amarle Reish Lakish Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish, who holds of Lois is going to do, meaning that it's aser. Rabbi Yochanan says it's not a problem. He says to him, why can you go ahead and lane 5 separate days Megillah? Isn't this Ikri Khan Lois is going to do? Isn't this a problem of, like, it's like 2 Torahs? Loisasu agudos, which we darshan, it's a drasha Lois is going to do, to say don't go groups and groups, meaning like 2 Torahs. Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan responds by saying, hi, Lois is going to do, the pasuk that you want to use to tell me that you're not allowed to do it, Lois is going to do, it's needed for the simple pshat in the pasuk. What's the pasuk talking about? Contextually, it's saying, don't cut your body as a way of like mourning. It's like considered a chilul Hashem to do it. You shouldn't go that far. This is like you, Kalman. Don't be a little girl. Don't be making yourself like torturing yourself over the loss of a loved one. Like it's going to do literally means don't cut yourself. So the Gemara, that's what Rabbi Yochanan says. You have no right to assume this pasuk tells you can't lane on 5 separate days. The Amar Rachmana loisasu chabura ala meis. You're not supposed to make a wound on your body. So Reish Lakish responds by saying, if that would be all the Torah means by Lois is going to do, im kain lemakro Lois is going to do. What's the double tough? There's 2 toughs and there's two dalads. We'll see. The double suf, that's extra tough, is coming to tell me my sis going to do. Shma mina lahach Yehuda to teach me not only don't cut yourself, but also don't cut Klal Yisrael. Right? That's sort of how you would understand the pasuk. Right? It says Gemara, if that's the case, maybe according to you, the entire pasuk shouldn't be even talking about cutting. Let's say it's entirely talking about groups and shtei Torahs. On that, he says, if that would be the case, then let there only be 1 daled. So the extra daled and the extra tough are teaching me both. My lois is going to do, meaning, okay, that was some homework just to figure out lois is going to do. But for our sake, you have Reish Lakish who says you can't go to Shtei Torahs. Rabbi Yochanan says it's not considered a problem of Shtei Torahs. Now it says the Gemara, what was his question? Reish Lakish was asking, how can we lane 5 days Megillah? The Torah says, not the Torah, but the Rabbanan, there's a din to lane Megillah. Meaning, you want to tell me that, even if it's not clear, is he asking from all 5? Is he only asking from the 14th and the 15th? That's not so clear. But the point is you have too many days doing 1 mitzvah. It doesn't make sense. That's the general question. So what's the response? Amarle, Rabbi Yochanan said back to him, what do you mean? Ad kad lo shanisa, meaning to say you only learned Masechta Megillah. I can't. That's where you're asking me from. Why not? Once you're asking this klutz kasha, why not ask me another klutz kasha? Right? So let's go to Pesachim. This is what Rabbi Yochanan. Remember the Gemara we learned about how Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, they had a unique relationship where it wasn't just to learn Torah. They would each sharpen each other in the way they would think. Rabbi Yochanan, after Reish Lakish died, he would start hey bar lakisha, meaning the way they learned with each other was so sharp with love, but so sharp that they sharpened each other in a good way. So Reish Lakish said to him, why isn't it like this? Rabbi Yochanan said back to me, he says to him, what are you, you don't think in your head? You didn't learn all the Mishnayos? Read the Mishnah in Pesachim in the 4th parak. 4th parak? Yeah, 4th parak, right? Mokum shenagu lasas malacha ba'arvei Pesachim. Look, we're finding first Mishnayos in Prakim, right? Common, you could probably read this Mishnah about Peh. Mokum shenagu lasas malacha ba'arvei Pesachim at chatzos oisin. Mokum shenagu shlu lasas oisin. Very brief recap. The halacha is that malacha Erev Pesach is also from Chatzos and on. Before Chatzos, it seemed some communities had a minhag to be makbid, not to do malacha, and some didn't. This is the classic case of, mokum shenagu, minhag mokum. You follow the minhag where you are. This is why even though we daven Nosach Ashkenaz, when you come to Yismach, you daven Nosach Sfar publicly, but in your private Shmoneh Esrei, you daven Ashkenaz. Mokum shenagu, you got to be respectful of the minhag of the place. So it says Rabbi Yochanan to Reish Lakish, you who have this halacha cholos is going to do, you make this drasha, you're bothered by Megillah, you're not bothered by this case over here. Now, it's not clear why this question is stronger. He's just pointing out to him, he's like, it's mashma, you don't think that this is a case of Lois is going to do. He's almost pointing out to him the inconsistency. You hold that Megillah is a problem and this case is not. What's the difference? Rish Lakish responds back. He says, Amina lachana isura. I asked you a question about Megillah, which is a din. It says you must lane on either the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, or 15th. The Amr of Shimon bar Abba, Rabbi Yochanan, Lekayim Yismiyapur Bismaneim Zmanim Harbi Tikkun Lam Chacham. It's a din. There's a halacha, and yet that halacha is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. That's what it's going to do. And you're bringing for me a case of two different communities that have just a custom, how they do it here, how they do it there. That's like telling me that it's like it's going to do because they sing Koach Soif and they sing, Yala Yala Yalili, whatever. It's not a real thing. It's just minhag. Who cares? He does it like this. He does it like that. It's not halacha. You're bringing me from there. I'm asking a real kasha. Like it's going to do is it's a halachic thing. If you have two separate Torahs, it's like the Torah said. What did the Torah say, or what did the rabbi say? Did they say 11? Did they say 12? That's a it's going to do problem. So he responds to him, "V'hasam lavi surahavi." Rabbi Yochanan responds back to him, "No. They're both talking about Isser. You're right. Maybe the Mishnah that I quoted wasn't actually halacha. That was minig. But the night before, everyone's masking that Beisham and Beis Hillel have a machlekes, and over there, v'hatnan v'layla, or they changed the gears here, halayla Beisham oiser and Beis Hillel matir. But the point is, you see, Beisham and Beis Hillel argue about whether malacha should be done or not, and here the lashon is oiser umatir. Here it's clearly talking about Isser v'heter, and yet you still see that despite that fact, you don't have a problem with that being a problem of Leisis going to do. So what does he say? He says, Amr Lei, this is Reish Lakish responding. He says, you're right, that's not Leisis going to do either. The fact that they argue, why? Because Hasam Haraya Omer Malacha Hu Delesle. Meaning, I only hold Leisis going to do is a problem in a combination of two things. Number one, it has to be that it's like two people acting that the halacha is like this and the halacha is like that. And that has to be a stira. And the second thing is, it can't be that I can interpret the behavior as anything other than a machlekes and halacha. Meaning, if I see people not doing malacha in a certain community, I might conclude the reason why they're not doing malacha is because they already did all the malacha. They've already finished everything. So maybe that's not why they're doing it. So therefore, that's the opinion of Reish Lakish, that Leisis Goydu has to be, it's a stira in halacha, a contradiction in halacha, and that's the only explanation for why they're doing what they're doing. Rabbi Yochanan says to him, okay, thank you for explaining your understanding of Leisis Goydu. Then why is it not Leisis Goydu in our Mishnah? That's why the Gemara is being brought in here. Meaning to say, is this not a Leisis Goydu problem? Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, they all live in the same neighborhood. And yet at the same time, you got Tzaras walking around that might be in Erva, that might be the kids are moms there. You have Leisis Goydu of your major problems. So Reish Lakish responds, he says, Misavris asu Beis Shammai kedivrayim. Do you really think Beis Shammai, who argued on Beis Hillel, actually kept the halacha like their own opinion? Meaning they argued with Beis Hillel, but they never actually acted not like Beis Hillel. Everyone acted like Beis Hillel, right? Lo yasu Beis Shammai kedivrayim. Beis Shammai didn't act like Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai always acted like Beis Hillel. Rabbi Yochanan Amar asu ve'asu. No, Rabbi Yochanan argues, meaning that's their machlekes. Reish Lakish says, you can't ask me a kasha from that Leisis going to do. Why? Because Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel always act in accord with each other like Beis Hillel. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan says, no, they don't. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are arguing all the time, and Beis Shammai acted differently than Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel acted differently than Beis Shammai, and therefore it's a question of, according to you, Reish Lakish Leisis going to do. The Gemara says, the Rav Shmuel. This halacha is a machlekes Rav and Shmuel as well. The Rav Omer lo also Beis Shammai kedivrayim, u'Shmuel Omer asu ve'asu. We'll pause here only because it's mamish in the middle. But unless you guys are okay. If you guys are okay, I don't mind going a little weiter.
We're gone.
Done.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll pause here. 4 lines down from the top. We'll pick up with a quick review in the morning of just exactly what the discussion here is in the middle. And Amir Hashem, we'll learn it out tomorrow. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night, guys. See you tomorrow in the morning.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.